I'm Andrew Garfield, and I'm here in the Criterion closet.
I watched all 10 of Andrew Garfield's Criterion Closet picks and ranked them according to my own subjective opinion.
First thing that I come to is a man that I've worked with called Terry Gilliam, and this is one of his all-time great films, Brazil.
In a dystopian society ruled by a sprawling, oppressive bureaucracy, low-level government worker Sam Lowry lives a monotonous existence. His only escape is a series of vivid daydreams where he imagines himself as a heroic figure soaring through fantastical landscapes and rescuing a mysterious woman. Simply put, I think this is one of the most creative films of all time, not only in its cinematography and its set design, but also in its use of retrofuturism as a mechanism to explore themes of bureaucracy and oppression and just the human desire to experience more in life than working behind a desk. I rank it number 3.
My favorite Mike Leigh film, one of my favorite films of all time, Naked, with one of the great performances of all time by David Thewlis.
Andrew, what did you just make me watch? I didn't think Spider-Man would have such a nasty taste in movies. Don't get me wrong, I think this film is great, but I can't recommend it to everyone because it has a lot of dark themes and rough content. This film follows Johnny, played by David Thewlis, you know, Remus from Harry Potter, as he vagabonds his way across London, being at the best unpleasant and at the worst abusive to everyone he meets. Still, somehow, even though his fingernails make it look like he ran out of toilet paper and had to use his hands, he seems to be able to woo any girl he wants to. That is probably the most unrealistic thing about this movie. I just cannot see these women going for this man, but maybe that says more about their internal state of affairs than it does about his external ones. Besides that, this film is a masterclass in acting. It has some of the best performances I've ever seen, quite honestly, and Greta Gerwig actually agrees because she used this film as inspiration for her acting in Frances Ha. I rank it number 7.
Company, the Cast Album, one of the great documentaries.
Original Cast Album Company is a documentary about, you guessed it, the recording of the original cast album of the musical Company. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a Broadway guy myself. I've only seen one Broadway show in my lifetime. Guess which one that is in the comments. So I didn't really know anything about the storyline for Company. I honestly didn't even know that Company was a musical or a Broadway show. I just did not know it existed. And not knowing that this Broadway musical exists before you go watch this movie about that Broadway musical is not a recipe for liking this film. Because this is a pretty simple documentary with a lot of long takes of the actresses and actors singing songs from the musical, and they're not even performing the songs, they're just singing them. So if you're not familiar with these songs already, I would not recommend this film to you. I rank it number 10.
Fincher, this is one of his early films, The Game.
The Game is a movie directed by David Fincher and starring Michael Douglas. This film is about a wealthy but emotionally distant businessman who gets a birthday gift from his brother, played by Sean Penn. The birthday gift is an invitation to participate in a personalized game run by a company called Consumer Recreation Services. I think this is a fine movie. It's entertaining, but I do think it would be near the bottom of my David Fincher tier list. The game that CRS plays with Michael Douglas in this movie, it doesn't really feel like a game. There's not a defined objective for him to achieve. It just seems like they kind of throw the kitchen sink at him and make him deal with it. And the ending just feels overly unrealistic to me and makes me associate this film more with something like Wild Things 2 rather than 7. I rank it number 9.
Oh, Kes. Another one of our great British filmmakers, Ken Loach.
Kes is essentially Matilda meets the 400 Blows, and it is the quintessential British social realism film. Faced with the lingering threat of working in the mines for his entire life, and also faced with the threat of constant bullying by the people in his life who should be there to support him the most, his brother and teachers, this kid finds meaning in the simple act of training a bird. The thing I will warn you about this film, though, is that it is one of those British films that you cannot understand because they are so British. So you will have to put subtitles on, and it's not like the good subtitles that are baked into the film so that they don't get in the way of the image. They're like those crappy subtitles that they just get in the way of the image sometimes, and I don't like that. But I still think this is a great film, and I rank it number 8.
And the first one is one of them is a Maisels documentary called Salesman.
This is a fascinating look at 1960s American capitalism and how it can turn people into monsters, because these salesmen are going door to door selling, like, I couldn't quite tell, between $50 and $250 Bibles in the 60s. What is that today? Is that like over $1,000 and in today's money? I don't know, but that's crazy. Okay, they're not monsters, and I really feel like the film tries to illustrate this, but they definitely have a self-interest because they don't really care if these poor people can afford the Bibles or not. They just want to make the sale and move on to the next person. But this film does make these salesmen very human as well, because they are just trying to survive in a dog-eat-dog world as well. They don't have much money either. They're just trying to make it, and they're trying to find that one thing in life that they can do well. And also, they are being taken advantage of by the people in charge of them. They are being taken advantage of ultimately by the church, who is trying to make profit off of them selling the Bibles. This is a great film. I rank it number 6.
Happiness. I love Happiness so much.
Andrew, this is one of the most upsetting movies I have ever seen in my life, but somehow also one of the funniest. Let me be clear up front, I kind of love this movie, but I do not recommend it to anyone because the subject matter is so dark, yet it is presented in a comedic way for some of it, and I don't feel qualified to talk about it. So all I'll say is that I think this movie is a perverted Love Actually. I rank it number 5.
Scorsese would be very upset with me if I don't grab one of his favorite films of all time, The Red Shoes.
So I have to admit, I wasn't super into this movie for the first hour of it. It's by the same directors as The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, and if you've seen one of my previous Criterion Closet reviews, you know I wasn't really connecting with that movie. But once the hour mark hits, there is an amazing masterpiece of a scene that will go down in history as one of the greatest scenes of all time, in my opinion, especially for the time it was made. And by the way, this is one of Martin Scorsese's favorite films of all time. Don't get me started on his name. I don't know if it's Martin Scorsese or Martin Scorsese. I've heard it different ways. But anyway, it's one of his favorite films, and he was instrumental in the restoration process of this film. There's a great video on the Criterion channel right now where he goes over some of the restoration process of the 3-strip Technicolor film, and it is great. Go watch it. I rank it number 4.
Hoop Dreams, another great documentary, one of the great documentaries of all time about one of the great sports.
Hoop Dreams is widely considered to be one of the best documentaries of all time, and I have to say I agree. It's basically Space Jam meets Boyhood. Space Jam because it's about basketball, and Boyhood because it follows 2 individual real-life people around for several years. In this case, it follows 2 high school basketball players from their freshman year in high school to their freshman year in college as they try to achieve a dream of playing in the NBA. It's a fascinating look at the struggles of people in poverty and the mechanisms by which privilege creates disparity, even within the same social group. You find yourself really rooting for these basketball players in their games, not just because the points matter for the game itself, but because we know that the better these kids play, the more likely their lives are to turn out to be decent. One thing I found very interesting about this film is that it was actually snubbed at the Oscars basically for being too good, and I think it's probably the worst Oscar snub of all time, right up there with the soundtrack for Swiss Army Man not getting nominated. Okay, Hoop Dreams deserves it more, but trust me, Swiss Army Man's soundtrack is amazing. For more of the breakdown on why this happened and the changes in the Academy that followed this debacle, there's a great Siskel and Ebert video on the Criterion channel that you can go watch where they basically just rail and roast the Academy for being dumbasses. I rank it number 2.
Tampopo, which is my father's favorite film of all time.
This film has been on my watch list for a long time, and I'm glad I finally got to watch it. I didn't really know anything about this movie going into it, but the structure and the way this movie is crafted was very surprising to me. It's basically like if Monty Python made a cowboy movie. At its core, this film is about traditional Japanese values, skit comedy, and food. And I don't want to give too much else away besides to say that this is a very funny movie, even despite the language barrier, which is an incredible achievement for a director. And I think that makes this one of the greatest films of all time. Also, the end credits scene is wild. I rank it number 1.